He was selling drugs and trying to make music. And he was around the right people to be trying to do that with, because those connections were going to, in his mind, further his music career, which is what he wanted. And no overt acts were ever committed in furtherance of any conspiracy that Shannon Stillwell knowingly and willfully joined. The state has to prove every element of that charge beyond a reasonable doubt. They have failed. There is reasonable doubt. It's not true. And your verdict on count 1 must be not guilty. Let's talk about count 2. Mr. Kokomo, if you would, pull up page 21. Actually, you don't need to do it. Count 2 is the charge from January 10, 2015, the murder of Donovan Thomas. Okay? But before we start talking about the evidence in the case, and we will, let's talk about music. Okay? We know that Shannon was working on music. I think we've made that clear. Through his phone, through the fact that he's always at the studio, through the fact that he has songs on his phone, multiple songs, some we've heard, some we haven't heard. Clearly, that's what he's doing in life. And we've also heard about drill music. We heard from Investigator Viverito. We heard from Antonio Sumlin. We heard from other people. We heard about the common themes of drill music, the things that make you marketable in that space. Okay? Violence, confrontation, having bodies, homicide, guns, more guns, bigger guns, being the toughest, being the baddest, not being scared, being a danger. Okay? And I'm not asking any of you to like that. I'm not suggesting I like that. Detective Underwood, she clearly didn't like it, and I'm not saying she's wrong. But it is what it is. That type of music exists. That type of music is popular. And that's the type of music that Shannon Stillwell was doing. We heard about the common terms in this drill music. Ops, glizzy, blicky, red lights. And we heard 5 of Shannon's songs. We heard Slat Talk, Lizard Walk, Red Light, featuring B-Slime and Vito. Bull, S-H-I-T, with Dolly, Jeffrey's sister, and Ran This Money with Slime Life Shorty, a signed artist who had already made it, at least to a certain degree. And in those songs, I agree, we hear about all sorts of violence. We hear about red lights, we hear about glizzies, walk 'em down, homicides, FNs, we hear it all. And out of context, it doesn't paint Shannon Stillwell in the best light. And I don't think I've ever claimed that Shannon Stillwell is an angel either. But it is art. And when he references beating a homicide, when he references beating a murder rap, when he keeps bringing up Donovan Thomas, it's not a confession. That's how he's known. That's what he's known for. That's his selling point in this type of music that celebrates it, much to some of our chagrin. It just is what it is. We saw a post that Shannon Stillwell made on January 27, 2022. Page 24, Mr. Kokomo.
And that's a classy gang in the chat.
This is the untranslated version, but I'm not hiding from it. The translated version says Peanut Stone Grave. But what does it say? I fell off 100 times, 100 times I bounced back. Life size, hashtag life size lizard. Lizard, what he's rapping under, lizard walk. Okay? And it says Manny Tumba de Piedra. What's he talking about here? Fell off 100 times. Why does he keep referencing Donovan Thomas? Years later, he's already been arrested for this charge. Wouldn't he be quiet about it? He would if he did it. But why does he keep bringing up Donovan Thomas? Well, I have two things for you to consider. First, maybe, just maybe, on that particular day in June of 2022, Shannon Stillwell had enough. For 7 years, the police put a target on his back, and people had been shooting at him. He was shot at the green store. They shot at his head. He was so bold to go to JJ's Chicken and Fish to get himself some food with the mother of his child and another female who was driving. He was so bold to do that, that when they left that parking lot, 3 men in a car sped up behind him and shot at that car, riddling the back of that car with bullets, shooting poor Tierra Jones in the face, instantly killing the driver, Miss Jones, causing the car to careen and turn over and over and over, severely injuring Mr. Stillwell, scarring his head to this day, putting him in the hospital for months, putting the mother of his child in the hospital for a month. And then, when the police come to talk to Mr. Stillwell, remember what he does? He feels bad about the situation. He feels awful. He asks the officer, can I write a letter of remorse to Tierra Jones's family? And he does. And then the officer says, well, can you talk to me about the case? And know what he does? He talks to the officers about the case. And he gives names. He gives names of the people that he feels were in that car, that red car that sped up behind him, tried to kill him, and killed Tierra Jones. He gave up those names. And what was his reward? Page 26. Mr. Kokomo. I think it was Investigator Griffin, I think is the investigator that was investigating that case. And what did he tell you? The discovery got out, and it was posted online. And the fact that Shannon Stillwell had dared talk to the police to try to help solve the senseless murder of an innocent woman was broadcast on Instagram and social media. And people were chastising Shannon Stillwell and coming at him on social media and in real life over the fact that he was made such a ridiculous decision as to try to bring justice to Tierra Jones's family. That was his reward for that. So yeah, people shooting at his head, narrowly missing at the green store. People shooting at him in a car, killing someone in the car and putting him in the hospital. People chastising him online for being so bold to tell the police what happened, who killed Tierra Jones, poor Tierra Jones. So yeah, maybe in January 2022, just maybe, possibly, he had enough. He was sick of the nonsense. If you want to say it, then I'll be it. You keep putting me down 100 times, you're making me fall, and I keep getting back up. And what's it all? Ultimately, what's the origin story of it all? The death of Donovan Thomas. That's how it started. It doesn't mean he did it. That's how it started. That's why he has that target on his back. There's another possibility as well. Mr. Stillwell is just a kid who was raised by his grandmother in Thomasville. Nothing more, nothing less. But all of a sudden, he was known as a tough guy behind this. wasn't true, but that was the public perception. That was the persona that was thrust on him. And maybe, while he was sick of it, sick of being shot at, sick of being chastised, sick of being threatened, maybe also a calculation was made, you know what? If they're going to keep shooting at me, I might as well lean into this a little bit. That does have traction in the streets. That does have traction in the music industry. Maybe that's why he's hashtagging his rap name in the post. The bottom line is, yes, I acknowledge he's referencing Donovan Thomas in songs. He's not giving any inside information in these songs that wasn't publicly known. Remember, he had been arrested. He'd been at prelims. He knows what the case is about. He's heard testimony about the case by this time, by the time he's making his songs. So he's not sharing any information that only the killer would know. Of course he's not, because he's not the killer. But maybe he is leaning into the bad boy image a little bit. But here's the thing. You might like my explanation or not. But could you put on 27, please? But let's just think. If songs were confessions, what would that really mean? Could you put on 28? Remember that song, Homicide, by Lil Woody, Kenneth Copeland? Who played the role of the assassin? Threat, Trevante Turner. You watched the video. I don't think we need to watch it again. Who gets killed? Someone who looks like Donovan Thomas. Who put money on his head? Kenneth Copeland. If songs are confessions, then Kenneth Copeland is confessed. He hasn't been charged. He's not sitting here on this indictment. So maybe songs are just songs. And posts are just posts. So let's talk about Donovan Thomas and some of the evidence in this case. Eyewitnesses. Who did we hear from? We heard from Reginald Hendricks. He was a gentleman that was shot. He was standing near Donovan Thomas. He didn't identify anyone. We heard from two witnesses, two people that were in the barbershop, working in the barbershop. They heard shots. They ducked. They described what happened afterwards. No one identified anyone out of those two witnesses. We heard from a man named Sammy Davis, an older gentleman who lived across the street, who knew Donovan Thomas. They called him Car Wash. He washed Donovan Thomas's car. He didn't see anyone in the car. That was his testimony. And then we didn't hear from, but we heard about someone named Spencer Wright. Well, actually, we heard about someone named Nicholas Robinson. What did we hear about Nicholas Robinson? And Investigator Thorpe talked about it, and definitely District Attorney Sprinkle talked about this as well. What did we hear about Nicholas Robinson? We heard about Nicholas Robinson September of 2015. He was being arrested for felony theft and a probation matter. And when he's being arrested, and when I say he's being arrested by the Atlanta Police Department, by an officer, and he's hours away from having, you know, what I like to talk about, the Fulton County Blues. He's hours away from having that blue jumpsuit on, right? And what did we learn that Nicholas Robinson did? He said, "Whoa, you guys arrested me. I want to go talk to a detective about a case." So they take him to Thorpe. He wanted to talk to him about the Donovan Thomas homicide. They take him to Thorpe, and Thorpe starts to interview him. Okay? And Nicholas Robinson claims he's at the scene and starts talking to Investigator Thorpe about what he saw. And that would be hearsay to talk about because he didn't testify. But we also heard that in the middle of that interview, Lieutenant Gaither was there. She's doing research into the background of this Nicholas Robinson. And what does Lieutenant Gaither realize? wait a second. This man who's saying his name is Nicholas Robinson, this man is telling Detective Thorpe his name is Nicholas Robinson, his name is actually Spencer Wright. So she goes and tells Thorpe. And what does Thorpe do? He's interviewing someone about what they allegedly saw in this high-profile case, and this person has just lied to him about his name. What does Thorpe do? He continues to interview him. And in the very next day, he goes out and takes warrants on 4 people, including my client. Then we hear about DA Sprinkle taking over this case in the investigation in early 2016. And him seeing this mention of this Nicholas Robinson, who was really Spencer Wright, and where he said he was when he witnessed events. And we hear about DA Sprinkle getting the surveillance and checking into it and talking to Spencer Wright. Where did you say you were? On what bench? Where? Circle it on his picture. And about how he went to look at the surveillance himself. And what did he see? An empty bench. Spencer Wright not only lied about his name, but he lied about a lot more. But know who he duped? Detective Thorpe. We're going to get back to Spencer Wright in a minute. We have no ballistics from the Donovan Thomas case, no DNA or fingerprints. We have an infinity car, which we will talk about in a minute as well. But essentially this case, this Donovan Thomas case, comes down to 2 witnesses. And in my opening, I warned you all about people wearing the Fulton County blues. That was the theme of my opening. Because as it's played out, it turns out Rice Street is a disgusting, horrible place. Being locked up anywhere is awful. And there are people who will lie on other people to stay out of Rice Street. You don't believe me? Spencer Wright, Nicholas Robinson. He's the proof of concept right there. Getting locked up, wants to talk to the detective, and then completely makes things up. And the next day, warrants are being signed. This is not some theory that I have that people lie to get themselves out of trouble. It's proven. Spencer Wright did it. He's not the only one who did it. So the state has these 2 witnesses, Quindarius Zachary and Kenneth Copeland. Those are the 2 witnesses. And I've been doing this long enough. They're horrible witnesses. They're liars. They have every reason to lie. They have every motivation to lie. They are inconsistent. They tell different stories every time they talk about the things they talk about. The state knows they're horrible witnesses. But here's what happens. In closing, the state says, they're not our witnesses. We didn't choose those witnesses. They're Shannon Stillwell's friends. He chose those witnesses. That's their line. They might not use it now because I already said it. But that's their line. But let's think about that for a second. That's not their witnesses? First of all, they're the ones that called them to the stand. But that's not their witnesses? Look at this indictment. 28 names. Quindarius Zachary? Is he on this indictment? No. Kenneth Copeland? Is he on this indictment? No. Nope. Are any of us going to really sit here and pretend that if the state was really being honest about who to charge about the events in 2015, 2014, 2015, that Kenneth Copeland wouldn't be on that indictment? Kenneth Copeland was a one-man crime wave in 2014, 2015. Yet, he's not on this indictment. Quindarius Zachary was a straw purchaser for guns. Quindarius Zachary was right in the middle, the impetus for one of the overt acts, the April 28th, 2015 shooting of houses. He's right in the middle of this. And they're not on the indictment? And we're supposed to pretend that the state aren't the ones that chose Kenneth Copeland and Quindarius Zachary as their witnesses? Of course they did. Of course they did. And why did they choose them? What are the qualifications that Kenneth Copeland and Quindarius Zachary both had when it really comes down to it? They're two people that are willing to lie on others to get themselves out of trouble. That was one qualification that they had. And two, they are two people that happened to put themselves in situations, serious situations, that would require them to lie on others to get themselves out of trouble. Those were their two qualifications. And the state said, sounds good. We'll sign you up. You're our witnesses. You're no longer on this indictment. Let's talk about Kenneth Copeland's credibility. So use the same tests you do for those quote-unquote expert witnesses. What's his bias, his motive? How's he come across on the stand? What are his motivations? Well, we know he really hates jail. That was clear. I submit to you that it seems that not only does he hate jail, but he almost has a mental disorder about, he literally said, I'd rather die than go to Rice Street. That's extreme. He's told us, I would do anything to stay out of jail. I would lie on anyone to get myself out of trouble. He has his own term for what he does, the finesse. He really hates jail. What else do we know about Kenneth Copeland? Well, we know about, I'm going to ask y'all to think back and remember this when he was on the stand, a case, 21 CP 197618, State of Georgia versus Kenneth Copeland. Remember that? When he was actually in jail and he picked up another charge because he claimed that a jail worker attacked him and sprayed him with OC spray for no good cause. And he brought charges, or tried to bring charges, against this poor jail worker. What do we know? The surveillance from the jail was pulled. The investigators looked at it, as they should. Even Kenneth Copeland, a known liar, when he makes allegations against the police, yes, it should be looked into. And it was. And what did they find? No OC spray was emitted. In fact, the officer that was accused didn't even have OC spray on them at the time. So what happened to Kenneth Copeland in that case? Well, he was charged with false statement and false report of a crime. 2 felonies, excuse me. So as a result of his lie, he gets charged with these 2 felonies. False statement and false report of a crime. And it's pending, and it's pending, and it's pending. Then all of a sudden, as this case is ramping up, and Mr. Copeland's going to have to take the stand and be asked about his pending charges and his prior lies, all of a sudden, on January 18th, 2024, Fonnie Willis and her employee, Kenneth Hutcherson, quietly dismissed the case against Kenneth Copeland, the case of false statement, a case of false report of a crime. Why did they do it, according to that sheet? Was it, oh, we actually looked at the video again and it actually supported Kenneth Copeland? No. Was it the victim didn't want to prosecute? No. prosecutorial discretion, they decided it was in their best interest to dismiss that case against Kenneth Copeland before he testified. Remember I told Kenneth Copeland about it? Thought he was going to get up and hug me. He said, "My case is dismissed?" Yep, sure was. State took care of you. You're not on this indictment either. Kenneth Copeland's a liar. He's a proven liar. And let's talk about his prior statements he made, because we know on June 10, 2015 is when he said Demekion Garlington gave him certain information and that Shannon Stillwell was one of the people responsible for killing Donovan Thomas. Demekion told him at the McDonald's. That's what Kenneth Copeland said on June 10, 2015. Well, we learned that Kenneth Copeland actually met with the police in 2015 4 times prior to that June 10, 2015 interview. We learned that he met with Investigator Thorpe on January 11th. Now, mind you, all these meetings, presumably, if it were true, Kenneth Copeland would have that knowledge of what Demekion Garlington said to him for all these meetings. January 11, 2015, he goes in to talk to Thorpe. Doesn't say anything about Demekion Garlington telling him that Shannon Stillwell is involved in Donovan Thomas's murder. Places himself at the Green Store, which is less than a minute away from the scene of the Donovan Thomas murder. And he's asked about, specifically by Detective Thorpe, if he's ever rented or driven an Infiniti. And what does Kenneth Copeland say? No, never. Denies it completely. That's on January 11th. That's the night going into the morning after of the Donovan Thomas homicide. And of course, we know that's a lie because Kenneth Copeland was in the Infiniti on the night of January 9th with Quindarius Zachary. So he lies right off the bat to Detective Thorpe. January 28th, he meets with Thorpe, Dennis, and Gaither. Again, never mentions this supposed statement by Demekion Garlington about Shannon Stillwell being involved. In fact, he's asked specifically who he thought killed Donovan Thomas. He mentions his friend Doc and goes back and forth about whether Doc could have done it or not. He shares a theory about Donovan Thomas running off with someone's drugs. He shares a theory about Kelvin Watts robbing people and Donovan Thomas being caught in that situation. And he's also asked on January 28th about a rumor that he stole Donovan Thomas's chain. And what's he say? Oh no, I didn't do that. Someone else apparently stole Donovan Thomas' chain, and they brought it to me, and I realized it was Donovan Thomas's stuff, and I returned it. I don't have any problems with Donovan Thomas. Me and Donovan Thomas are cool. He also said that on the 11th. So then we go to February 20th, the third statement he gave. Again, never mentions anything about what Demekion Garlington supposedly told him. And Investigator Curry, asked him about the Donovan Thomas case. Doesn't know anything. And then on February 21st, with Gaither and Thorpe, he's again asked about the Donovan Thomas case. Never mentions, oh, Demekion Garlington at the McDonald's told me that Shannon Stillwell did it. Again, he's asked about Donovan Thomas's chain, and it's another lie. Oh, well, someone brought it to me. He sticks with that lie. Lie after lie after lie. Denying beef with Donovan Thomas, denying stealing Donovan Thomas's chain, denying ever being in an Infiniti. But those are the statements that Kenneth Copeland gave leading up to June 10, 2015. Could you put on page 33, Mr. Kokomo? So, this is a picture from June 10, 2015 that's in evidence, and it is misleading. It shows Mr. Copeland wearing street clothes civilian clothes, not a blue jumpsuit. But let's not get confused. Let's not get it twisted. On June 10, 2015, Kenneth Copeland, for the first time, was headed to jail for serious charges. That's what's different about this interview. He was headed to Rice Street. He had a gun charge from the Dunbar Rec Center. Remember when he brought the stick into the rec center and left it on the bleachers? He had just been arrested on that warrant from when he did that. And when they arrested him on the warrant, they came into his girlfriend, Deshawn Quarterman's apartment. And what did they find? They find another gun, a stolen Smith & Wesson, in Deshawn's kitchen. And they find a stolen MacBook in Deshawn's apartment. And they find stolen IDs and stolen property in Deshawn's car. And so now we got 2 guns, stolen property. Oh, and then the police are saying, oh, this stolen property, it's linked to auto breakings that have happened in your neighborhood. So he's got guns, and he's got a federal agent in there as well, Agent Cunningham, who's talking about these cases going federal. He's got a lot going on. And promises are made. Well, let's talk about the threats first. And all these officers say, oh, I wouldn't threaten him. I wouldn't threaten him. I threaten no bodily harm on him. I'm going to tell you. Max Schardt said this here today. Y'all threaten to punch me in the face anytime. But don't threaten to put me in prison for 25 years, no parole. That's a real threat that gets my attention. You can punch me. But the state and the police act like statements that Agent Cunningham made, like, you're an armed career criminal. We got you dead to rights. You're facing 15 plus 10. That's 25. No parole. You're not going to get out till you're 48. And that's not even including the conspiracies. You won't see your children till you're 48. That's a threat. That's a lot more bigger threat than I'm going to punch you in the face or we're going to beat you until you confess. That's a threat. What else do they say? It's totally up to you if these charges go federal or not. You have to help yourself. I'm going to call the U.S. attorney and they're going to ask me, what did he do to help himself? You see what goes on here? This isn't an accident. This is the playbook. Get the liar, get him jammed up, threaten him, tell him he's not going to see his kids again until he's 48, and then, oh, but maybe we can do something for you. You just got to give us what we want. And yes, that was enough to make self-admitted liar, self-admitted finesser, a person who fully admits that he would lie on anyone to get out of jail, to stay out of jail, to get out of trouble. That was enough to coax him to make up a story about Shannon Stillwell and others. And that was actually enough to put his plan in motion because he knew someone was going to have to back up his story. And that was enough to have him reach out to Demekion Garlington and try to get Demekion Garlington to go out and go on with the story, which, of course, Mr. Copeland told us he's no longer friends with Mr. Garlington because Mr. Garlington would not go along with that story. Or he's upset with Mr. Garlington because Mr. Garlington would not go along with that story. Maybe you say, Max, we get it. He's a liar. He was jammed up. But maybe this threat of prosecution was what was needed to bring out the truth. Maybe he was being truthful on June 10, 2015. Well, let's think about what else he said on June 10, 2015. Remember when they were talking about those auto breakings that they suspected him of? And said, you're going to have to answer these auto breakings. Why do you have all this property in these cars? We know you're involved. Remember what he said? Nah. That was Lil Mike and Quez that did them. Remember the detectives? They looked at each other, Lil Mike and Quez, Lil Mike and Quez. Well, what did we learn in the cross-examination of Kenneth Copeland? Little Mike and Quez, not only did they not do the auto breakings that Kenneth Copeland claimed they did on June 10, 2015, Little Mike and Quez, they don't exist. He made them up on the spot on June 10th of 2015. So my answer to you, if you think, oh, this pressure was needed to get Kenneth Copeland to finally be truthful, nope. He was lying. He made up people that didn't exist in this very statement that the state wants you to take as truthful from one of the biggest liars we've ever seen in our lives. Mr. Kokomo, if you could play what's on page 35. And what did Kenneth Copeland say on a call from the Fayette County Jail on December 21st, 2022, on a recorded call that Attorney Steele brought out?
First thing I did, I got into it. I lied on to it because I found out he I can't say that. I can't say that on the phone, but it's some shit happened between me and him back then, and just so happened I got locked up the next day. You feel me?
He admitted. He said, I lied on Thug. The very same interview, he was saying all sorts of things about Thug. He admitted he was lying. He was making stuff up to get himself out of trouble, to get out of his situation. And he got caught on a recorded line saying as much. Ladies and gentlemen, Detective Thorpe fell for the finesse. Kenneth Copeland said it was easy. Lieutenant Gaither fell for the finesse. The police report fell for the police department fell for the finesse. Kenneth Copeland got up on the stand and explained the finesse to you, to your faces. We know better than to fall for Kenneth Copeland's finesse. We know better than to just accept his words. Mr. Kokomo, if you could put on page 36. This is the other state's witness, the other witness that they chose to bring in front of you, Quindarius Zachary. And yes, he's wearing the jail blues, and he had every reason to lie to get himself out of trouble. First of all, what did Quindarius Zachary say at trial? He admitted that he lied on Shannon in two prior statements. One August 5th, 2015 to Lieutenant Gaither, and then one in a proffer session on March 3rd of 2017. And he also admitted on cross-examination that even those two statements, those two lies he told about Shannon Stillwell, were not even consistent with each other. But none of the police seemed to mind. None of the prosecutors seemed to mind. Why? Remember his lie? His lie was, oh, the night of the Donovan Thomas killing, Shannon Stillwell confessed to me at Jeffrey Williams' condo. And then he also went on to lie about Shannon Stillwell on this August 5th, 2015 statement, lied about Shannon Stillwell's involvement in really a bunch of other cases. Cases that Shannon Stillwell has never been charged with. He just lied on Shannon. And he admitted his motivation for lying on Shannon. He admitted that he knew, or he was under the belief, that when he talked to the police, when he talked to Lieutenant Gaither, first of all, he needed to get bond. He had been locked up for about 7 days. His family had been calling Gaither, we heard about that, begging her to go up and talk to him. What was the urgency? Well, we didn't get into details, but we learned that Mr. Zachary has a serious illness. A serious illness that he wasn't going to fare well at Rice Street under those conditions. So he needed to get out. So he has people calling Gaither, come see me, I want to talk to you. And then he also has the motivation of the April 28, 2015 case, which he was facing at this time. He told you, I was under the impression, and I didn't do the math, this may be right, this may be wrong, but this was his impression, that he was facing something like 185 years. Yeah, that's pretty good motivation to lie. And then he was also concerned because he got caught with a gun on May 7, 2015, that he knew was ballistically linked to other crimes. So that was a reason for him to lie. And finally, why Shannon? Because he wanted to get back at Demekion Garlington, because Demekion had told the police about the April 28, 2015 incident. And he figured blaming Shannon for things was a way to get back at Demekion, because at that time, Demekion and Shannon were close friends. So those were his motivations. Let's talk about the statements he gave. We heard about Investigator Gaither being called repeatedly to go down there and talk to him on August 5th, 2015. And she said, okay. Remember, he wanted to talk about other stuff. He didn't want to talk about his case. He wanted to immediately get to the point where he's telling lies on other people to get bond or get released, get consideration. And Gaither, to her credit, said, no, we got to talk about your case first. Let's talk about April 28, 2015. And what he said, I wasn't there. I wasn't there. The only reason I know about it is because Demekion Garlington told me the next day. So immediately, he's lying to the police, saying he wasn't there, which of course we know he was there. Lieutenant Gaither knows he was there. But what's his explanation? It's odd. It's interesting. It seems to be a recurring theme. I wasn't there, but, and where did he say was also? I was at home because I'm always sick, right? I was at home, I'm always sick, I wasn't there, and the only reason I know about this is because Demekion Garlington the next day confessed to me. Seeing a pattern? Everyone's always confessing to Quindarius Zachary, according to Quindarius Zachary. Of course, that was a lie. Demekion Garlington had not confessed to him. That was made up. He made up a story about someone confessing to him. And in fact, he was there. Gaither called him on it. He about 2 or 3 times said, I swear I'm telling the truth. I swear, I swear, I swear. And finally he gave up the lie. And then he proceeded to move on to other cases and make up lies on Shannon. March 3rd, 2017 was the second statement set up by his lawyers. You got to understand what a proper session is, that it was a session for him to give as much information as he could about as many instances as he could, and the DAs were in the room. They can consider the information given, and then they can give any consideration that they deem appropriate to Quindarius Zachary for his assistance in providing information. Those were the 2 statements. But here's the thing. You know, it's not complicated to keep a story straight if it's the truth. But if you're making up lies, the context, the details tend to change. It's a little bit more difficult to keep everything straight. And I think about all of us. You know, I think about when I was a kid. I saw a space shuttle explode on TV when I was sitting in the classroom watching it take off. And I remember exactly where I was I remember who was sitting next to me. I remember whose class it was. I remember what grade I was in. It's etched into my memory. I remember when my favorite football team first won their Super Bowl in my lifetime. I remember everything about that. I remember who the announcers were. I remember who won the MVP. I remember what room I was watching the game in. I remember who I was watching the game with. I remember when this country elected their first black president, our first black president. I remember who I was watching TV with that night, the emotions, what room I was in, what channel I was watching. I remember even silly things. I remember watching the Oscars and seeing a man run up on another man and slap him in the face while I was watching with my wife on her bed in our old house while she talked on the phone with her sister. I remember those details, those things that are etched into my mind. And I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, if a friend of mine came up to me in real life like this, if it really happened, if a friend of mine came up to me and said, Max, I have something to tell you. Earlier tonight, I murdered one of the most powerful gang members in all of Atlanta. I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, that I would remember exactly where I was when he said it. I would know exactly what was going on, where we were, who else was there, and what exactly was said. Because that's the type of thing you wouldn't forget. That's the type of thing you wouldn't forget details of. But what do we know about Quindarius Zachary's renditions of this alleged confession by Shannon Stillwell? It changed. It changed from August 5th, 2015 to March 3rd of 2017. On August 5th, 2015, he claimed that Shannon Stillwell confessed, but just said, we caught Nut down bad. On August 5th, 2015, he said, we caught Nut down bad. And then, according to Mr. Zachary, on August 5th, 2015, Shannon Stillwell also named 3 other individuals in the car. That was his statement on August 5th, 2015. But then on March 3rd, 2017, he's asked about the same alleged confession. And it's, oh, Shannon just told me he caught Nut down bad, and he didn't give me any other details at all. Didn't say anyone else who was in the car. What about the timing of the confession? On August 5th, 2015, Quindarius Zachary claims the confession occurred just as he and Muntunk pulled up to Jeffrey's condo. And Shannon was about to go to a girl's house, and we crossed paths, and he confessed to me. On March 3rd, 2017, what was the story? No, Shannon wasn't there when I arrived at the Sky House. Shannon didn't show up till later that night, till about 4 or 5 a.m. He was dropped off by some girls. I know because I let him into the condo. How do those details change about something that would stick in your mind if it were true? And the answer is because it's not true. Because it was a story that was made up by Quindarius Zachary, who was facing 185 years, who needed to get out of jail because he had a serious illness, who knew that the gun he had been arrested with was going to be linked to other crimes. And just like Kenneth Copeland, he was someone that was willing to lie to get himself out of trouble. And at that particular time, the state, the investigators, and everyone else had enough leverage on him to force him to make that decision to lie on someone else to save himself. It's a sick game. It is a sick, sick game. So we got these two liars who were strategically interviewed at the very time they're most likely to lie. Wouldn't it be cool if we had some corroboration of what these two known liars claim? Phone records. The state has repeatedly claimed that there's some corroboration in these phone records, and I give Agent Bernie some credit. That was the FBI cast agent that talks about the phone records and plots them. He was very careful. He was very clear. This does not give exact locations. First of all, it's just devices, not people, but it doesn't give exact locations. It doesn't tell you where people were. It gives a general area. It tells you what cell phone may have been closest to the device when it was being used. And these cell phone towers have all different radiuses and all different signal strengths. So you just get a general idea. You've got to be very careful about what you read into these cell phone records. That's what he said, the expert. And yes, he talked about different people calling different people that know each other calling different people on January 10, 2015. Shouldn't be that surprising. And yeah, he put Kenneth Copeland, as did 88 Sprinkle, Kenneth Copeland at the Green Store, in the general area of the Green Store around the time of the homicide. The Green Store that is what? A minute away from the barber shop? What did the phone records corroborate again? That Kenneth Copeland was right there at the time of the murder? That people were generally going north and south on the highway? What did they say about Shannon Stillwell? Where did they say he was? Go look at those phone records. Did they provide any cell phone records for Shannon Stillwell? How about Diamante Kendrick? What is the power of those cell phone records again? What did they corroborate? Did they have Kenneth Copeland wear a wire? Remember, when he was so desperate to get out of jail, I'll wear a wire, I'll wear a wire. That would have been an idea. Prove what you're saying, Kenneth. Don't just, you're a liar. You're a known liar. Don't just tell us stuff. Prove it. Nope, they didn't put a wire on Kenneth. What about wiretapping phones? We know they know how to do that. Did they wiretap anyone's phone to corroborate anything Kenneth Copeland and Quindaria Zachary said? Nope. So then we get to surveillance video. And this is where this gets kind of ugly. Kenneth Copeland claims he was at the Green Store, not outside the barber shop at the time of the killing. And his phone records put him in that general area. How many times have myself or Attorney Steele asked about the Green Store? Detective Thorpe claims that he went to the Green Store to try to get surveillance, but he didn't think they had any. Really? Because I heard about my client being shot at, his head being shot at that very same Green Store, and I heard the officer responded and looked at the surveillance to determine who was shooting at my client. I've seen pictures of the Green Store. I see the cameras. They don't have surveillance. Okay, Detective Thorpe, so you tried to get surveillance. Do you have that in any of your reports? Any documentation of you going to the Green Store to try to get surveillance to corroborate the claims of Kenneth Copeland? Oh, no, that's not in my report. Ask Gaither, Lieutenant Gaither, about the Green Store. Why would I go to the Green Store? That's not even relevant. Really? I beg to differ. She had no interest. in corroborating Kenneth Copeland. So then we talk about the McDonald's surveillance. The McDonald's at Old Hateville and Cleveland Avenue, the very spot where Kenneth Copeland claims in his story that everyone met and that Demekion Garlington told him who killed Donovan Thomas. Well, we know the McDonald's had surveillance. That's been testified to by several officers. And we know we don't have the McDonald's surveillance for January 10th, 2015. So I ask, Attorney Steele asks, I ask, other attorneys ask. First we asked Gaither, did you ever try to get surveillance to McDonald's? And what did she say? Oh, we went like 2 or 3 months later, we went and we talked to a general manager and they weren't able to get into the cameras right then, but we took the card and we gave the card to Thorpe. That was her explanation of the efforts to get camera footage from the McDonald's. I said, okay, do you have that in a report that you drove down to the McDonald's and talked to? Who was the person you talked to? What was their title? What was their name? Where's the card? Oh, no, I don't have that in a report. Nope. Okay, so then we asked Thorpe, what did you do to get surveillance from the McDonald's to corroborate anything Kenneth Copeland said? And this is where it gets ugly. He said, I went a couple days later and I talked to the people and they said the footage had been erased. The 15-day or however many days the cycle is ended and all the footage was erased and it started all over again. That piqued our interest because everyone knows that's not the way surveillance cameras work. Everyone knows it's first in, first out on a rolling basis, meaning if it's a 15-day cycle, at the end of 15 days, everything isn't just erased, but it starts taping over the beginning parts again, so you always have 15 days memory. Everyone knows that you wouldn't go to the McDonald's 2 days after an incident and find out that the whole system had been erased, because that's not how surveillance systems work. And we asked every officer, it seemed, that came up here.
Everyone.
You ever hear of a surveillance system working that way? Where it just all erases at one time, or does it roll first in, first out? Every one of them said they never heard of a surveillance system just erasing all at one time. Every single one of them. So, does that McDonald's on that corner of Old Hateville and Cleveland Avenue have a one-of-a-kind, a one-of-one surveillance system that they're operating? I don't think so. But what does that mean? It means Detective Thorpe lied to us. He lied to y'all. He didn't go to try to get that surveillance from the McDonald's. He didn't go 2 days later. What did we hear from D.A. Sprinkle? Remember that? And that's a straight shooting. D.A. Sprinkle. What did D.A. Sprinkle said when we asked him about it? Hey, did Detective Thorpe ever mention trying to go get the footage from the McDonald's? Did that ever come up? Because, we've been asking a lot about this McDonald's footage. What did D.A. Sprinkle say? Detective Thorpe never brought that up to me. And that seems like something he would have brought up. Detective Thorpe lied. Either that, or he did go get the footage, and it doesn't back up Kenneth Copeland's claims, and it's in his missing file somewhere, which he can't find to bring to court. I guess that's a possibility. But he lied. All right, so the elephant in the room. Who killed Donovan Thomas? It's not our burden to solve this case, first of all. The jury instructions are clear. It's not our job to solve cases especially cases that happened 9 years ago. But to the extent that it factors into the question of reasonable doubt that Mr. Stillwell committed that crime, let's just leave it like this. I know someone who has a closest associate named Trevante Turner. I know of someone who is arch enemies with a man named Kelvin Watts, who is the brother of Donovan Thomas. I know of someone who, with Trevante Turner, went and shot up Rich Homie Kwan's father's barber shop in 2014. I know of someone who stole Donovan Thomas's nut chain and wallet and cell phone out of his truck in late 2014, and when asked about it by the police, repeatedly lied about that situation, repeatedly pretended that him and Donovan Thomas were cool. I know someone who was jumped by Kelvin Watts in Club Crucial on January 6, 2015. I know someone who basically admitted on the stand, I'm listening, to shooting up the TIG studios at 675 Metropolitan Avenue on January 8, 2015, 2 days before Donovan Thomas's death. A shooting which shot a hole in Rich Homie Kwan's windshield. And if you recall from the officer who responded to the scene, a shooting that very well may have occurred while Donovan Thomas was present. Remember, I asked that officer, were the people there in the studio at the time? Yes, there were. Who were they? I don't know. They wouldn't open the door. They wouldn't come and answer. And I know someone who was put on the proverbial plate by Donovan Thomas on January 8th, 2015. Mr. Kokomo, could you please play DS24F?
The green light. The green light clip. Beautiful. Beautiful.
I got somebody, I don't know his name. He was there. He everything. He called the night. Well, I forgot what day they got killed, but it was a Friday night. It was a Thursday night. Mm-hmm. They had a barbecue. Mm-hmm. But the barbecue did go out. It was blood. Everything blood. Mm-hmm. And the whole meeting was based upon me. They was all in there talking about this and this, talking about this and this. So the nigga Mo was on the phone. So Mo told everybody, all I need, every last one of y'all, whoever 90s scraps here, whoever that other nickname, supposed to kill me. They gave all them guns. The same night, gave every last one gun. Said, treat me to a gas station and kill me. I forgot what else. But he called and he told me everything, and he said, is this person in front of yours?
That's good. The whole meeting was based on me. Gave all of them guns. They were instructed to trick me to the gas station. This wasn't some universal Donovan Thomas after everyone. This wasn't Donovan Thomas after YSL. It certainly wasn't Donovan Thomas after Shannon Stillwell. They were after Kenneth Copeland. I know somebody who had the opportunity. Not only does cell phone records put him right in the area, but we know the car was, we know the shooting, the murder was perpetrated using a certain Infiniti. An Infiniti that was rented for Kenneth Copeland by Jeffrey Williams. Because Kenneth Copeland needed a car. An Infiniti that Kenneth Copeland was in possession of in possession of the day before the Donovan Thomas shooting. An Infiniti which was last known to be in the hands of Kenneth Copeland and Zachary before, according to Kenneth Copeland, he handed it off to his good friend, closest associate, partner in shooting up Rich Homie Kwan's father's barbershop, Trevante Turner, also known as Threat. In conclusion, regarding count 2, ladies and gentlemen, there is an absolute lack of reliable evidence against Shannon Stillwell. He had no motive. His problems with all these people happened afterwards, once APD falsely accused him, once the streets falsely accused him of committing this crime. That's when people started shooting at his head and shooting at cars he was riding in. He didn't have any problems with Donovan Thomas. There's no evidence of that. There's no forensics, no DNA, no cell phone records putting Shannon Stillwell at any scenes. He's not on the Texaco video. It's just two witnesses, both proven and admitted liars who changed their stories repeatedly on tape, right in front of all of us. Both people who had every reason to lie when they gave their stories. Two people that were chosen by the state to be the key witnesses in the case. But two witnesses, to their credit, who at least came in here and owned up to the fact that they were weak. They chose themselves. They chose to lie on others to save themselves, and at least they came in and told you that. Other than that, there's no corroboration at all. All right. We got a little more to go, okay?
That's it.
That was my hint.
All right. Dropping hints, dropping subliminals.
Let's take that.
All right, so I believe so this is pretty clear to me at this point that defense has 2 hours each. There's two defendants, but Doug is letting Max use some of the time. So either that or Whitaker's not doing a hard line on the stop, because we are 3 minutes shy of the 2 hour mark for Schardt at this point. But I imagine Doug said, take some of my 2